Welcome, dear readers. You are listening to Time to Read, a Winnipeg Public Library podcast book club. We are coming to you from our command center, the Carol Shields Auditorium, located in our headquarters, the Millennium Library. We are, of course, located on Treaty 1 territory and on land that is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In this episode, we will discuss All Systems Read by Martha Wells. If there is a book you think we should discuss in the future, let us know at wpl-podcast@winnipeg.ca. I'm Alan Chorney, branch head of the Transcona Library, and as far as I can tell, my governor module is still intact. To my right is...
My name's Kirsten, and I am All Systems Harv at the Harvey Smith Library. I just thought of that right now. I didn't prepare. And to my across the table is...
To your across the table. Hi, I'm Erica Ball. I'm the librarian bot at the Fort Garry Library. And across in the other direction, joining us today is...
Hi, I'm Dennis. I work in the Idea Mill, and I have downloaded lots of media to get me through this episode.
We're so happy to have Dennis joining us, because Trevor's off on Holidayland.
Holidayland. It's a good place to be.
A good book can carry me away from an average and ordinary day, yeah. So keep it down, leave me alone, close the doors and turn off the phone, 'cause all I ever really need is a little more time to read.
And you, dear readers, we couldn't do this without you. It's your questions and comments that form the heart of our discussion, so make us laugh or make us cry by emailing us at wpl-podcast@winnipeg.ca or leave a comment on our website, wpl-podcast.winnipeg.ca. Find out if your comments made it on the air by subscribing to Time to Read on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, and other fine podcasting services. In a moment, Kirsten will start us off by giving us another brief bio of Martha Wells, followed by Erica, who will spoil everything with a brief synopsis. Then it is on to the discussion, which you can get in on by emailing us at wpl-podcast@winnipeg.ca or finding us on Facebook. And don't forget to stick around to the end for our special segment, Nerd Words for Word Nerds. Kirsten, take it away.
Take it away. Martha Wells, American writer of speculative fiction. She has won numerous awards, Nebula, Locus, and Hugo Awards, among others. She was born in Fort Worth, Texas, and has a BA in anthropology, which some folks have said has really given her the ability to create these complex worlds in her books.
Anthropology, woo.
Yay, anthropologists. When she was still in elementary school, she'd watch reruns of Godzilla movies and then write stories about them and made elaborate maps of Monster Island. She tries to write 1,000 words a day, often in bed or on her bed, and usually with the help of some noise in the background like a TV. She has written short stories, novellas, and novels, and recently started to write a series of shorts for Dominaria, the next Magic the Gathering set.
Oh.
So, okay, so now I had a hard time even saying Dominaria, but obviously you all know of which I speak.
I used to play. I was a Magic kid.
Oh,
so,
there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is Martha Wells.
Yay.
Oh, actually, sorry. I wanted to just say one other thing, and I'm going to link this in our show notes. I found this really great speech that she wrote and read at the 2017 World Fantasy Awards, and it's called Unbury the Future. And it's about secret histories, lost histories, in which she talks a lot about female writers of science fiction, African-American writers, LGBTQ writers, non-binary, and not just of science fiction, but in a lot of different areas where those writers have been sort of lost. It's a very, very good speech, so I will link to that.
Is it a link to the text, or is it a link to a video?
Well, there's a video, but there's also the text as well. So
I'll
give you both.
That's cool.
It's really, really great.
Awesome. How did we come up with this as a selection? I was wondering that. I don't remember.
Well, I pushed it a while ago when I first read it.
It was one of your book suggestions for something, like another book you might like or something like that, this series?
That was after the Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
Yeah.
Right, because that's how I found it, was after that as well. Because they were on the same sort of lists, and I was on a kick of like lady science fiction writers at the time. So it's been on one of our potential to read list. And then I think it was when Trevor said that he was going to be away this month and Dennis said that he would sit in. And we kind of said, Dennis, what looks interesting to you? And so I think it was Dennis who picked this one.
Because, you know, killer robots, and I like killer robots. So
you can't,
who doesn't?
You can't really lose with killer robots. So yeah, so that was cool. But I wanted to, about the anthropology topic, is that like I just remembered my first real in-depth exposure to ideas of gender and overlooking women really was in a gender archaeology class at U of W, where we talked about trying to find or interpret evidence in terms of women and children instead of in terms of men, which changed a lot of the context and a lot of the questions you asked. So that's pretty cool that that's sort of where she's coming from as well, is thinking about this. I mean, not that, but in this book, Murderbot doesn't have any parts. So the sex and gender thing is a neutral question.
But we can still speak to that.
Anyway,
yes.
We can still speak to that. But so far, we haven't done the synopsis yet. So I'm going to do the synopsis now.
Go, Erica.
So here I go. I'm going to give the first word to Murderbot because I thought that the way Murderbot talked about itself or themselves and the way was pretty much, whatchamacallit,
perfect.
Pretty much perfect. Pretty much spot on. Very whatever. So this is the quote that really stood out for me as to the character of Murderbot. So, I'm awkward with actual humans. I know I'm a horrifying murderbot, and they know it. And it makes both of us nervous, which makes me even more nervous. The self-named murderbot would have you believe it doesn't really want to do its stupid, boring job protecting the humans surveying an unknown planet. That it would rather binge watch media content alone. But when an unknown life form attacks one of the team it's assigned to protect, Murderbot is forced to not only start paying attention, but actually needs to talk to the humans, which is excruciating. When the humans try to include it, ask it questions, and worst of all, treat it like a person, Murderbot must confront its own social awkwardness and self-consciousness, all the while trying to solve the mystery of what or who is trying to kill them all.
Yeah,
that's my synopsis.
Wouldn't we want to read that? Yeah.
I have to say, for a character that calls itself Murderbot, I could only think of one person that had killed the whole book.
Yeah, worked really hard to stop people from being murdered.
Like, was there more than the one Delftfall sec unit?
That it actually kills?
Yeah, like it disabled a couple at one point, and it, that giant hostile one that burst out of the ground, it wounded it so that it withdrew.
But didn't it kill like a whole bunch?
It has a mysterious backstory.
Or we don't know that for sure.
Well, that was before this book, though, but in the book itself.
Yes, right. Yes. Yeah.
There's only one murder you can attribute to Murderbot, so I thought that was interesting.
That's true.
I think it's a self-deprecating name based on its acknowledgement that it was really only made to have weapons and be a weapon.
Maybe it's a never forget that you're a murderbot, that you murdered all those people.
Well, it certainly seems to have been a very pivotal moment in the existence of this unit.
I kind of interpreted it as shame.
Yeah,
like a self-shaming.
Murderbot was ashamed of what had happened
for sure
in the past and basically beat itself up constantly by calling itself a murderbot.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is like a character responding to trauma.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and self-blame. Poor Murderbot.
Did you guys get that feeling more than just the name? Because I would agree with you that the name definitely felt that way, but I don't know that I got that Murderbot beat themselves up over their past a lot.
Well, it's hard because I've read the following two parts. So part of what you learn there maybe is coloring my perception of this part. But I think that when I first read it as well, you can see its desire to be on its own, its denial of that it should be treated like a person.
Yeah.
It's reluctance to engage with the humans could all stem from a self-punishment or I don't know what I'm going to do.
Now that I think about it, the whole Murderbot running away at the end from the life that they should want kind of gives it a bit of a, I don't want to be here kind of thing. I want to run away. I
also thought the whole time Murderbot insisting that it didn't care was another form of armor for it. Like it'd like to be in its armor and have its helmet opaque so that no one could see it or talk to it.
Oh man!
And also insisting the whole time that I don't care. This is a stupid job. I'm only doing this half-assed anyway.
Mm-hmm. And I don't even know what planet we're on. That's how little I care.
Yeah. But at the same time, it still goes out of its way ignoring orders that it thinks will cause damage to its people, you know.
And really not wanting anyone to see their emotion, not wanting to have emotion, but that's why wanting to have that shield down so that nobody could even see that they have emotion.
Like,
I know people like that who are like,
I
am a robot, I don't have emotion.
Right
I'm not
don't
pointing.
Look at me. Yeah, no. The scene that really tore at me was when the murder bot wakes up in the med bay or whatever and doesn't have its suit on and can't look at the people that are talking to it. And so it's watching the whole thing through the video camera, through the video feed. Mm-hmm. And then when it gets really overwhelmed, it goes and it stands in the corner and it looks in the corner. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's so many feelings. Like that's so, but also understandable for, you know, anyway.
Yeah, I think the character really speaks to all of us introverts.
Just a little bit.
Because we're all like, oh, the idea that you can put up a shield and you can just turn on a show and watch it and ignore everyone else and just...
That would be amazing.
Just put yourself in a corner. Put yourself facing the wall. Too much.
Or having the feed going on in the background so you can watch media content while you're sort of also watching the humans. Like that would be great.
Very awesome multitasker.
When you're on the bus or something, you can just have it playing.
I really like the scene at the end where Murderbot was like in the crowd of people and they're like, oh, in a crowd I'm anonymous.
Right. Yeah.
That was a cool realization.
Yeah, so what a character. What a good character, I thought. And then when I was writing my my synopsis, it occurred to me that one of the things that I wanted to talk about was, and maybe it was because that this time around I listened to the audiobook version of it, and it was really hit when the human characters would call it, because like they're discussing its personhood, but they're still calling it, and I'm like, I kind of just wanted them to start saying they or some sort of gender neutral pronoun, which you'd figure in a future where people have like multiple partner like setups and stuff, maybe gender wouldn't be such a big deal and there'd be gender neutral options. But then when I was writing my synopsis, I couldn't suddenly start calling it they because that's not the way it is in the book.
Yeah.
So it was kind of weird because I was going to try to talk about them like a person instead of like an object.
Yeah.
I mean, Murderbot didn't express a preference for, how to be
described.
Yeah. But seemed perfectly fine with it, you know. But it
was tied up with, is it a person? And all those conversations and the Murderbot's own feelings about whether or not it is a person and whether it should be treated like a person, which it didn't feel like it should have been.
Yeah, but
they didn't feel like they should have been.
Assuming you do treat Murderbot as a person, and one of the interesting things about the crew is that all of them immediately agreed that it was a person.
Clearly a person.
You know, even Gareth, and there was that one line, you know, where they were saying, no, you have to think of it as a person. And he's like, I do. I think of it as a heavily armed, angry person who has no reason to trust us. Yes. But it's a person.
Yes.
You know, but it's not a person, like it's not a human.
Right.
Right. So it may be perfectly appropriate in this culture and environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's a construct. It's not a,
but still
what
just
we considered a full human.
Well, I mean, like, I think what Dennis was saying, like that you could imagine an alternate reality where it is a perfectly appropriate.
Totally.
Neutral pronoun.
Especially if you've got situations in which there's like levels of augmented humans and then constructs and then droids and then robots and then AIs that run cargo ships and like a continuum of like how much human, what did it call it? Like matter, not human matter, but it was like,
was it organic?
Organic matter.
Organic, yeah.
Yeah. That something is made out of.
And they mentioned to Murderbot at one point that in preservation, bots have rights.
Right.
Right. And referring in that case to actual bots, like with no organic components.
Yeah.
And then constructs would fall under the same rules.
Yeah.
So.
But they need a guardian.
Yeah. Yeah. Which was a.
Which is it full rights or is it not full rights if you have a guardian?
For a novella, I'm realizing I didn't like retain tons of the details as you guys discussed.
Well, this is my second go around too, right? So I've been thinking about it and
Well, the other thing too is like a lot of the story, like it's all told from Murderbot's perspective, and Murderbot is intentionally not interested in the world around it, right? It wants to stick to the serials and other things like that. So we don't really get a lot of characterization for most of the characters because Murderbot's not even looking at them, right? He's it's just not that interested in all the details about the universe. And then also keeps pointing out that its education modules were crap.
Yeah.
Because all it needed to know was how to kill things.
Yeah.
And outside of that, everything it learned was from watching media.
And then every once in a while, you'd get Murderbot saying something like they'd observe things like the relationship between two of the folks in their world.
Yeah.
And how it liked how they were together. And I thought that was interesting. That was sort of getting a bit later on into the story where obviously it's sort of noticing some of those human relationship things. And then at the very end, too, calling... I don't remember anybody's names, but anyway, he had his favorite or its favorite human,
Dr. Mensa.
Dr. Mensa.
Dr. Mensa.
Mensa wasn't so bad for a human, I think.
Exactly.
For the Murderbot.
Dr. Mensa was kick-ass. Like,
she was. She really was.
I was trying at one point to think, like, if this was made into a serial, which it should be.
Yeah.
Right? Who would play Dr. Mensa?
Who would play Dr. Mensa is a great question.
In my imagination, it was Sigourney Weaver because she's the most kick-ass actress I know. And I thought, well, who else could be?
That would work. That would work. Yeah, it has to be somebody pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was thinking when Dennis was talking about how Murderbot doesn't pay attention to the outside world as much. And then I'm wondering if that kind of ties into the length of the novel, because that's one of the questions we put out there, which was All Systems Red is just 150 pages long. Do you think a novella is long enough to create a whole world and tell a complete story? Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering if the small condensed sliver of the world that Murderbot sees is echoed in the format of the novella.
Well, this is an interesting question.
Thank you, Alan, for raising that.
I don't think I thought about it exactly that way before, because my answer was going to be, yeah, this is a full and complete story. But then I was thinking that compared to the discussion we had last time on books in a series and what a difference it makes is if it's planned as a series or as a standalone. And I think when she wrote this in her head, it was just like episode 1 of the Murderbot Diaries, right? So it is its own little mystery of like who's trying to kill us, but it's also obviously part of the larger story of what's going on with Murderbot and what happened with it, like killing all those people somehow in a mysterious way. So in a way, yes, and in a way, no. To your question.
I read an article or an interview with her and with Martha Wells, and she said that the first one was actually intended to be a short story.
Oh.
And then as she got into the story, she realized it really needed to be longer, but that the novella was the length. I don't think she ever thought that it was going to be a novel.
Interesting that there's like always a length for a story. But I want to bring in someone emailed us in today. Yeah. Fatima emailed us at wpl-podcast.winnipeg.ca, just like you can. And she said, let's talk about the novella format. It's not a huge seller in publishing, but Tor Publishing has built this great arm with novellas. I believe it allows authors to tell a story without resorting to a bad novel or a middling novel with a lot of padding. How many times have you read a novel and thought, it would be better if it didn't do this long?
Yes.
All Systems Red story is really a mini mystery within the beginnings of an arc. Doesn't need padding, and I bet Wells, the last character's lead in the story. We have high stakes, bots running amok, and one self-aware secbot with a hole in its memory, unsure about relating to people. For Wells to move from novellas to a forthcoming novel, it means she has a humdinger of a story to tell, which is a really interesting thought to reflect on, how much work she puts into a novella to look forward to, she's going to do a good job of a novel.
It's going to be really interesting to see if and what are the differences between the way she structures a novella and a novel. And I kind of have the feeling that what I would do is take the first three books, the novellas, and publish them as one book, and then have the sequel, so that's like two volumes.
Well, no, but there's a fourth novella, and then she's also publishing a full-length novel. There's a whole other one before the full-length novel. Yeah.
And the novel is in this series as well, or no?
In this universe, but the novella series is like a complete story arc.
Okay.
Like a lot of things come full circle by the time you get to the fourth one.
Oh, it's exciting.
Yeah, you should definitely read the fourth one.
I haven't read the fourth one. Maybe I have. I don't remember.
I forget when it came out.
Artificial Condition. I can't remember.
Exit Strategy is the last one.
Oh, right. Exit Strategy I have not read.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yes. Well, that's the thing. I read the first one and I was like, oh, okay, I got to read.
So you read 4.
I read all 4.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one nice thing about novellas is that they're quick.
Yeah.
Like when I did a reread of this one, I read the whole thing in one day. So,
That's nice.
I like that.
I do.
But the good thing too is that because I kept hearing from people saying, oh, and then it ends, and then you got to read the next one. But you know what? You don't have to as well. like you can read it, and it's a complete story. Like,
yes, you can. It's perfectly satisfying.
It can end where it ends.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
well, not for me because I was like, "Where's he going?"
Obviously, lots of people really don't feel that way, but
But also, I fell in love with Murderbot. So
yes, and
I
so
just wanted to
many
hang
people
out with
talk about
Murderbot more.
So are you going to read the rest, Kirsten?
Probably not. I mean,
I don't know if I will.
I mean,
you guys are crazy.
It's funny. So I was just on holidays and I was traveling with my friend Cheryl. Shout out to Cheryl, big fan of the podcast.
Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for listening.
And she actually started reading the series because of your recommendation from before, and she just loved it so much. So she said that she was reading. She does a lot of reading on her phone, and what she found that it was quite difficult because she wouldn't actually know when she was actually at the end. Because when you're reading an actual physical book, okay, I'm almost near the end. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And how can this now be over? But for her, she said it felt so sort of jarring. It was like, what? That's it?
Yeah.
That's it?
Is this an incomplete file?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I felt like that too. Is when I was getting, even just with the book, I was getting towards the end and I'm like, okay, is it just going to like live happily ever after now?
Yeah.
Because this is clearly the end of the book. And then it left and I was like, what?
Yeah,
Where?
The ending was really abrupt. Like there was that whole scene and Murderbot knocks Dr. Mensah off the ledge and then basically shuts down because it's too much damage.
Yeah.
And then when it wakes up again, a whole bunch of stuff has happened.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, the rescue ship came. They got off the planet. Grey Chris people maybe got arrested. We're not absolutely sure. But then they started doing all this legal stuff to take possession of Murderbot. And all that happened off camera.
Right. Which I like. I don't need to go into all that detail. That's fine. Because stuff happened. And now we're back into the meat of the story.
It's the Murderbot's diary.
Yeah.
And also, it's apparently a letter to Dr. Mensah. Because at the end, it says something about addressing it all to Dr. Mensah, which was another thing that broke my heart a little bit because I think Murderbot's got kind of
it was a nice like small twist at the end that it was a letter. But now I'm like, I think maybe the Murderbot letters might have been even a cooler title than the Murderbot diaries.
Oh, but diary, I don't know. But then it's not a twist.
Right. Yes. No,
It was a real punch to the gut, though, that last paragraph. It's like, oh, geez.
Yeah. What was the other? There was another part that I was going to say that always gets to me. Oh, the first time that it refers to the humans as my humans.
Oh.
It calls it them my humans a couple times and then says something like, I love my humans or my humans are the best. And I was like, oh, my icy heart.
You don't think that's a little creepy?
No.
Really?
Because it's like my friends. It's my team.
I guess I could see that in the world there, but if anyone
started calling you their human,
I think I'd be a little weirded out.
Just step back. Yeah.
Especially if it was a bot
with guns in its arms.
Especially if it was a murder bot.
I'll tell you the line that got me too, and it's kind of a trope, so maybe it's a cheat. But when Murderbot had been damaged, and Pinley leaned over and said, and I said, this unit is at minimal functionality and it is recommended that you discard it.
Yeah.
It's an automatic reaction triggered by catastrophic malfunction. Also, I didn't really want them to try to move me because it hurt bad enough the way it was. Your contract allows... Shut up, Mensah snapped. You shut the F up. We're not leaving you.
Yeah.
And I just got little chills.
Yep. Yeah. It's like, don't leave me behind. And they're like, no, we will not leave you behind.
Yeah.
So since we all have favorite lines,
yes.
I'm gonna segue, but I'm gonna put my favorite line a little bit later on, and then bring up this question because my line will come in later. We asked, Murderbot relies a lot on viewing entertainment media to cope with its boring and stressful situations. What's your go-to movie or series when you want to de-stress? Which I thought is a good question.
It's a really good one. I right now I'm rewatching Brooklyn Nine-Nine for like the fifth time because that is a silly show, and
Andy Samberg's the best.
Andy Samberg's the best, and it's just like, well, I mean, I guess like this, it's like a ragtag crew. I love a ragtag crew, but they like form their little family unit and they like look after each other, and they're all ridiculous, but everybody just does their own thing. So I like it's just something silly and charming and positive after I get tired of the real world.
An interviewer actually asked Martha Wells what her favorite sort of escape TV show to binge watch is. And she said, I have a lot of favorites. I love Elementary, Doctor Who, The Expanse, Star Trek, Discovery, and The Flash. And I was a big fan of Stargate Atlantis, SG-1, and Farscape. I also watch a lot of British mysteries on Netflix or PBS like Luther, Shetland, Lewis, and Endeavour, plus subtitled mysteries from a lot of other countries.
So sci-fi and mysteries.
Like I said in my bio, she likes to write with the TV on. So.
Yeah, I feel like that would be like so hard. But
look, if Murderbot can do it,
that's right. That's her.
But her answer is kind of like, "What's your favorite media? All of it.
All of it. All of it. I will watch it all. It will all entertain me and distract me."
But have you guys seen Luther?
Yeah.
No.
Oh my gosh.
I've seen some of it.
There's a
couple
show.
Of seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So you listed all of Martha Wells. What's your go-to media?
Well, if I'm just like trying to sort of escape, BBC mystery things like Broadchurch or what was that called? The Top of the Lake. Like some of these, mysteries, but also kind of beautiful to watch and that kind of thing.
I feel like I agree with Martha Wells and her like all media approach. Like there's so much media that I watch. I like limited to movies that I've like watched over 10 times.
See, I just don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't rewatch things. No.
I'm more likely to watch movies more over again than I am to watch movie series, but my list is Moneyball, Gattaca, Donnie Darko, Chasing Amy, Conversations with Other Women, Requiem for a Dream, Revolutionary Road, Closer, Rounders, and Good Will Hunting.
It's quite a mix.
The only movie I've seen a lot of times is Princess Bride, which I can watch anytime.
Yeah.
When I used to watch like The Simpsons used to be my, need to relax something. When we were younger, we had a videotape of just episodes of The Simpsons. We just put it on and we'd probably seen them all like 10 times.
That's part of it. It's the familiarity of it when you watch things like that.
Well, that's one of the things I saw mentioned somewhere about the Murderbot's tendency to watch media is that it's a form of self-care, right? And it's something you don't often see in a lot of novels or stories, is just a character needing to take care of itself and finding some way to do that.
Yeah.
And Murderbot did a lot of that.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes too getting engrossed in media can be not care as well.
Yeah, it depends.
One of the scariest things that, I guess not scariest, I should maybe tone this down a bit, but so I play a lot of PlayStation video games, and each year they send you a list of like how many hours you've logged. And
Why would they do that?
I don't know, because it made
like
me,
a wake-up call?
but it certainly was for me, because last year I had two video games that I played over 200 hours. And like well over 1,000 hours in video games, which is just like
when you compare it to
terrifying.
Other hobbies, though, I don't know if that's.
That
if it's what you enjoy doing, then why not spend your time doing it? That's what I think.
Because then I look at it in terms of benefit. Like, what are my benefits? Like
joy.
I see.
I don't know.
but sometimes I'm like, is it joy or is it just distraction?
Yeah,
if it's
that's
joy,
true.
it's fine. But sometimes it borders into distraction, which is bad. If you're, I could have learned to play the guitar or.
But you know what? Like there is that phenomenon called flow, where you go into that relaxed state when you're doing something that doesn't take a lot of conscious input, and it's very, very good for you to go into that state.
There's also
like
the state of throw,
which would be better than
I know. I was just gonna say.
Yeah, no, the state of throw when you've played the game and you're getting killed by this boss monster over and over, and you end up throwing your controller across the room.
I have been there. Yeah,
there's definitely the flow state in video games, and then there's the like, why can't I put this down?
Then there's the like potential like addictive behavior
where I'm just doing this boring, repetitive thing over and over again. But I love this game so much in other ways that I can't stop.
Right.
Yeah.
Although in the case of this story too, like for Murderbot, it's literally the only other thing it can do aside from its job.
Oh yeah, I totally wasn't implying that Murderbot
has a problem.
Has a problem.
Yeah. Well, in the case
I'm saying I have a problem.
Yeah.
This is a safe place.
And I'm not calling you a robot, Alan. I honestly am not.
You're one of our humans.
That's right.
One of our favorite humans.
Yeah.
But my favorite line, which is kind of tangentially related to this topic, is when Murderbot's like, I like the imaginary people on the entertainment feed way more than I like the real ones. But you can't have one without the other.
That's my favorite line. I wrote it down, page 117.
We would have underlined it in the book.
Yeah.
That's great.
There was an interesting
one the other.
There was an interesting thing that when I was rereading, I realized about that statement too. Like that statement came out of that discussion with Garathan, right? Where Garathan was like...
in the audiobook, he pronounces it Garathan.
Garathan? Mm-hmm. Well, I'll assume
I don't know.
that he's probably correct. Garathan says to him, you don't blame humans for what you were forced to do, for what happened to you. This is why I'm glad I'm not human. They come up with stuff like this. I said, no, that's a human thing to do. Constructs aren't that stupid. What was I supposed to do? Kill all humans because the ones in charge of constructs in the company were callous? But what I was thinking when I was rereading that too was that, like, that's a large part of the reason Garathan didn't trust Murderbot the whole time and why he kept questioning him and testing him is because his fear was that Murderbot was legitimately angry and hateful for what had been done to it.
Yeah.
There was an interview
Maybe that says more about Garathan than about...
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was thinking of it in the context of reconciliation stuff because, like, the author...
If it were me, I would be angry kind of thing.
Well, because in the author mentions in an interview that a lot of the stories about AIs being people are often end up essentially being slave narratives. Mm-hmm. And they're not considered persons, partly so you can justify having them be slaves to you. Mm. And so the idea that, okay, they realize this isn't a mindless mechanistic thing. It's a person, and they've been treating it like crap. They're part of the system that's been treating it like crap. What happens if they give it freedom? Mm-hmm. Or if it gets freedom, will it take it out on them? And I think a lot of times when, people are discussing like this with reparations for slavery in the U.S., with, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada, a lot of people are kind of afraid that if we actually started going by the treaties, for example, or things like that, that the people who have been oppressed for so long will take it out on us.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's a small box, and Murderbot could literally kill them all. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of an expression of a fear that a lot of society faces in situations where we're trying to correct that kind of oppression. Yeah,
there's that fear of the loss of power. What would it look like if I give over some of this power that I'm not supposed to have to begin with, but like who knows what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes a justification is like in slave narratives or the slave stories, like when we were reading like Washington Black.
Yeah.
There was that whole thing, well, he's free now. What's he going to do if he gets a chance? Would he take out a bit of revenge? It was
really heavier in Underground Railroad when they kept talking about how, especially when what was the community? Was it in North Carolina, South Carolina? The community that was a lot of escaped slaves. Yeah. And they were talking about how there's so many more of them around than the white people. And the white people are scared. Yeah. Because what are they going to do now that they're free and society and white people have been so horrible to them? So. Mm-hmm.
But that only occurred to me like on the third rereading of the story.
I was just going to say those. Like,
the first time I glossed over it.
Insightful.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's true. It's very true. But and I just wanted to give a shout out to the phrase "kill all humans" because she used it at least twice, and I think that's an awesome phrase that I know from. I don't know if that's where it came from, but from Futurama when the robot would say, "Hey baby, you want to kill all humans?" And so when she uses it twice, she uses it there, and then with the rogue sec units, saying that they could have just been hijacked for another order, and as long as it's not too complex. And then she says, in my head, Murderbot is her. Anyway, and I noticed in you referred to it as he. But anyway.
See, I thought that you were talking about Martha Wells. But
Martha Wells also, writing through whatever, but said, kill all humans is not a complex order, which I thought was a great quote. And I tried to post it on Facebook, but then they gave me this thing of we're going to review your content because it has kill all humans in it, so I deleted it. That's funny. So I don't want to get in trouble with Facebook. But anyways, yeah. So shout out to Kill All Humans, which is
which I guess brings up this whole other question on screening on social media of your completely, I guess, rational or logical or commentary on society is kind of being censored or self-censored by Facebook
algorithms.
Yes, broad net there. So
tech.
Yeah. The other thing I liked about the story, like a lot of science fiction will take modern concerns and put them into a futuristic context. And one of the things this one did, like, since we were speaking of Facebook, is they mention near the beginning that, the Bond company required the sec unit there and clients didn't like it. And one of the reasons they didn't like it is because the sec unit was recording all of their conversations and then they would data mine it afterwards. And they said, no, they don't tell people that. Yes, everybody does know it. No, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yes, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, Facebook knows you just said kill all humans. And,
even
yes,
if you
they're going to data mine it.
Yeah, and just check and see.
No,
if
there's nothing I can do about it.
And just check and see if you start getting ads for robot building tools
or something. I don't know what I'm going to start getting ads for. It's so weird. Could be anything.
Yeah, that's the creepiest is when you start getting ads. And then especially when you don't know where the ads came from.
Yeah.
Because I was just talking to my sister about that.
You email a joke about like, we should get pizza sometime. And then you keep getting ads for like pizza places. And you're like, thanks, I have a pizza place. I don't need your suggestion, Google ad.
So I guess one of the questions that we also asked is Murderbot a reliable narrator? And do we care?
Yeah, on Instagram, Erica Martaby said, that's you.
Me.
Oh, I know.
What did I say, though?
No,
I don't remember.
I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah, I don't care.
You're just so trusting of Murderbot.
You know what? And like while we've been sitting here, I'm thinking about how much Murderbot loves ridiculous shows and whether or not any of this is some sort of like Murderbot fever dream imagination. Like, I'm going to kill everything and save the humans. But I don't care. Like...
Murderbot's just some sort of subroutine in a corner of a network somewhere, just
Sure.
churning out this whole story.
It's so much fun. I don't care if it's not reliable.
Who came up with that question?
I know.
You?
Do you remember?
Me?
Was it you?
It might have been
That was
me.
you.
Yeah.
That was me. I'm all about the reliable narrator.
Like, wondering if if you thought there was anything that
I think I'm often thinking that when I'm reading books.
It's a recurring thing in our conversations.
Is it reliable? I
And
mean,
plus, it's a murder bot. Like,
but weirdly, you kind of didn't get that impression that it was unreliable. I think one of the only things that made me kind of distrust Murderbot was that Murderbot would constantly be, monitoring the feeds of everybody, which was, I was like, that's kind of not cool, but
literally it's job. So
Security, right?
yeah.
Security versus privacy. The age-old question.
the only way I could see Murderbot as an unreliable narrator is that in the sense that Murderbot doesn't have a lot of experience in the world, except for the part where it stands around and tries to keep people from killing each other and maybe kills people. So its understanding of everything else in the universe is limited just because of...
So it might be missing some contextual clues that could change what it's seeing.
And a lot of the clues are from like the serials.
Right?
Right.
So,
Fiction.
it'd be interesting to go through and look and see how Murderbot frames everything from the perspective of viewing entertainment.
The first time I read through this, one of the things I thought about is like what makes Murderbot different from all the other sec units, right? When it describes hacking the governor module, it says, well, all the modules are standard. So he just, and he had to download from the manual, basically. It was capable of doing it, but none of the other units do that. And apparently it's not that hard. That we know of. But it's like the first thing it did was start watching media. And there's a theory that's been studied a few times that the rise of empathy in humanity is largely driven by the rise of fiction, of novels, of people being able to get in someone else's head. And that's also where like a lot of Murderbot's tactical knowledge comes in. It said at one point, this wasn't in our download, but he saw this on a serial.
Imagination.
Yeah, but just also caring enough to break the rules and, ignore orders from the hub system in order to protect something it wouldn't have had much motivation to do, except it started getting involved in serials and feeling like it was connected to humanity somehow. And, as library workers, it's a positive message I think we can encourage. Read more books, kill fewer people.
Yep. Imagine, create. Anyway, I took it a step further in my head because it's creating new behavior for itself, and it's imagining things that are quite different than what it's being told or what it was programmed to do.
well, and there's definitely lots of, because I do a lot of work with prisons, and in terms of like trying to kind of make the case for us bringing in books or certain books. And we often talk about reading fiction helps build empathy. Yeah.
That just reminded me of something Fatima said in her email, and I'm trying to find it here, which I can't, so I'll just paraphrase it.
That she says that technology first and foremost comes from humans and still needs humans.
Oh.
That's something she said.
That's something she said.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty good. I was going to paraphrase her. She said she had the novellas earmarked to donate to the prison.
Oh, right. Oh, excellent. Right.
Lovely.
We will take them.
Identity theft, data breaches, government surveillance. Digital privacy is something more and more people are concerned about. Winnipeg Public Library's Digital Privacy Guide shares reliable information about your privacy rights in Canada, online and offline resources on the trends of data tracking, as well as tips and tools to help you protect your identity and data online. Find out about the 4 Manitoba laws that are in place to protect your personal information. Learn more about big data, digital citizenship, browser fingerprinting, password security, and other things that affect you online. To access the Digital Privacy Guide, go to winnipeg.ca/library and click on the Info Guide button, where you'll find the Digital Privacy Guide and more than 24 other information guides. Stay safe out there.
Okay, so I think we're going to move into our Can You Tell Me a Book You Would Also Like segment.
I have a cop-out.
Recommendations? A cop-out?
Uh-huh. Because
is it the second novella?
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not that bad. But it is, what it really reminded me of was the AI Lovelace parts in A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. So I'm just going to refer back to...
You're just going to do a circular recommendation.
Yes, I am. Because the character Jenks would always make a point of being very polite and respectful to any AI that they encountered in that book and listen to it do its whole spiel, even if it wasn't sentient. And that just sort of is echoed in these people realizing that constructs and stuff are worthy of respect.
Which is, I guess we haven't talked about this, but I thought about it during this discussion, is something that's fast coming up with artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
The increasing, smartness and how that's going to play out, and will they achieve sentience? Which
I first encountered in Orson Scott Card sequels to Ender's Game. There becomes it's not really an AI, but it's sort of an interplanetary network, kind of like the internet, that eventually reaches enough connections that it becomes similar to its own mind, and this consciousness rises out of it and names itself Jane, and is a character in one of the sequels to Ender's Game, which was a really cool thing.
The movie Her, in which the operating system becomes conscious.
Those are, I guess that's more of an unintentional AI than
an
intentional AI.
Any other recommendations?
I'll go next. I mean, of course, my book suggestion / recommendation / I read this next. I was just on vacation, and so I read Murderbot first because it was nice and short, and then the vacation took a little bit of a turn, and so it became quite tough and emotional. So on the plane ride back, I was thinking about reverting to a book that makes me feel good and sort of a comfort read. So I was rereading parts of A Field Guide to Getting Lost by Rebecca Solnit, which are short essays that are very personal, philosophical. I don't know if you've read Rebecca Solnit before. I think I've already suggested one of her books before as well. She's a really beautiful writer, and in this field guide, she explores loss and uncertainty and desire and memory and sort of stumbling through life, either intentionally or not intentionally, and growing through that. Yeah, sort of how we use stories in order to find our way through the world. So I found myself revisiting that book as sort of a comfort read. Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to recommend a life goal that I have not yet achieved.
I think you often suggest books that you actually haven't read, but good.
I think I've only done it once before, but I'm going to do it again.
Do it.
I'm going to recommend Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace.
That is so weird that you say that. I'll tell you why after.
Which is like the polar opposite of a novella. It's like huge. I can't remember if it makes the top 10 longest novels of all time or if it comes close. But anyway, one of the central themes of Infinite Jest is this piece of media called, I think it's called Infinite Jest, that once you start watching, you like literally can't stop watching it. So it's used as kind of like a murdering device in that you'll forgo personal cleanliness or eating. So you'll just like kind of die in your own sloth if someone's this on in front of you. So yeah, which I'm recommending because we were talking about viewing entertainment media.
Okay, that's the tie-in.
So that was really weird because I'm reading, and I can't remember now, the book I'm also reading, it's called All Things Shining, and it's a nonfiction about rereading the classics to reinvigorate modern life with more meaning and stuff.
Yeah.
And it came out of a previous podcast where I think it was my nerd word. Oh, it was the poetry one, and it was poesy, and I started reading about that. And then this book was mentioned as part of the definition of what that was. So I've been meaning to read it. I'm finally reading it. And the second chapter is about David Foster Wallace and his nihilism, but also the way that he was struggling with the questions of like, what's the point of living in this time and place where we are now? And how his books are kind of like self-referential with pages of footnotes and just dealing with this weighty stuff and like the depression that he suffered and stuff like that. So it's really weird that was your
recommendation.
Yes, it blew my mind. Yeah.
So, I haven't been reading as many novels and stuff lately. So reading Murderbot actually got me back on a bit of a sci-fi kick again because it's been a while since I read sci-fi, but I enjoy it. On the cover of most of the Murderbots, I think it's got that quote from Anne Leckie, I love Murderbot.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, they also had a comment from her on the cover of Becky Chambers' books, A Closed and Common Orbit, which was the follow-up to Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. And when I was looking at lists of books people might like, Anne Leckie keeps coming up. So I actually read Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie, which is the first novel in the Imperial Rat series. And I have to be honest, I usually don't like books that create too much of a world.
Yeah.
Like when they start creating bits of their own language and get really deep into culture and stuff like that. So like Game of Thrones stuff where there's all this lore
really
involved. Yeah, or Tolkien. I actually, aside from
go
the
there.
I started reading the Silmarillion once and it was just way too
that's a lot.
So I went into this one kind of expecting not to like it much, but it drew me in really well. It follows a character named Breck, who is the last surviving piece of an artificial intelligence that used to run a spaceship and thousands of ancillary units.
Oh.
And now just exists in one body. And Breck's voice is very different from Murderbot's. Like Murderbot is flippant. Murderbot is almost like an emo teen in terms of the sarcasm and the cynicism and stuff like that.
Which is why we like it.
Which is very, like, it really drew me in, but Breck is very even-handed and somehow feels like a 2,000-year-old entity that's so even. And all these little bits of culture and description of history and things like that in the novel end up building up to a couple of really intense points. So I was kind of amazed by it. And
what was the name of that novel again?
It's Ancillary Justice. And first part of the series, and I'm going to read the other ones in the series too, because it was really good.
This is what happens when you start reading Murderbot.
You never know where you'll end up.
You never know where.
Yeah.
Back to reading fiction again.
And now it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Nerd Words for Word Nerds, the part of each show where our hosts boil down their most prevalent thoughts of the past month into one. Who wants to go first?
I can go first this time.
Yeah.
Because my nerd word is ancillary.
Perfect.
Which is, as an adjective, means providing necessary support to the primary activities or operation of an organization, institution, industry, or system. And as a noun means a person whose work provides necessary support to the primary activities, yada, yada, yada. And I like the concept of ancillary because I often feel like most of the things I've done in my life have been ancillary to another person or organization's primary motive. And of course, we work in a library where all of us are typically front desk a lot, but we depend a lot on the ancillary support that we get from support services and other staff within the
Part-time
library.
staff, yeah.
And I don't know, that was just on my mind just because I hadn't heard it before.
Yeah. It is a great concept. And I think something that gets overlooked a lot is all of the work that goes in for whoever or whatever is the scene tip of the iceberg, right? Can I go next?
Yes.
I thought you might want to.
Go.
So mine word doesn't have anything to do with anything because I didn't really have a word that was kicking around except for the word it, which I mentioned why before. I was like, that's a weird word, it. Like, what is that even? So I sort of lazily started searching for etymology it, and that doesn't produce any useful results. So, but what did pop up was something called an Introduction to Etymology, 8 Great Word Origins, and it was on Babel magazine website. And it was just 8 random words that had crazy origins. But the very first one was avocado. And, avocados are having a moment. And I love me an avocado.
Delicious
So
moment.
I was like, okay, I'll just read this about the etymology of the avocado. So really, my nerd word is avocado. The word avocado comes from Spanish aguacate. That sound like the way the Spanish people would pronounce that word? I don't know. Which in turn comes from the nahuatl, huacatl. So sorry. But anyway, it means testicle. Surprised? Perhaps. But the more one thinks about it, the less surprising it gets. Especially when you see avocado duos dangling from trees. Nahuatl is the language of the Aztecs and is still spoken by approximately 1.5 million people native to Central America. Avocado isn't the only word which has been borrowed by the English language. From the Nahuatl, chili, chocolate, tomato, and guacamole were also coined by speakers of Nahuatl. Indeed, the mole of guacamole is derived from the Nahuatl mole, which means sauce. It's a good thing the origin of this word has been obfuscated on its way into the English language. Otherwise, guacamole probably wouldn't be as popular as it is. And
Excellent.
So that's from the article.
I totally have to go next.
Okay, but I want to do a quick segue because avocado reminds me there's a great song by a band called Los Campesinos called Avocado Baby, and the line is heart of stone, skin so tough it's crazy. That's why they call me the Avocado Baby.
Okay, good. All right. What was yours, Kirsten?
I just have to go next because my nerd word is dongle. And that's why I'm missing Trevor here who'd be like, hey-o. Anyway, so another shout out to Cheryl. Like I said, she's a big fan of the podcast, but she has a new iPhone and she hasn't been able to listen with her old earphones on the new iPhone. And she was like, how am I going to do this? And then she learned about the dongle. And the dongle, of course, the word has been around for a long time, and it means a small piece of computer hardware that connects to a port on another device. So, of course, I found this amazing article from The Atlantic. The origin of the word dongle,
nice.
7 leading theories.
Oh, 7 leading, which means there's others that are not leading.
And it starts with dongles dangle. All right, which is why I needed to. Now I'm not going to talk about every each theory, but so some have said the name came about. It's just arbitrary, or that it's a corruption of the word dangle, which could be, or it's an appropriation from poetry. The word dongle has been in use most often in poetry as an onomatopoeic term for the ringing of bells. To wit, this 1915 poem, The Bells of Berlin. The bells of Berlin, how they hearten the Hun. Oh, dingle, dong, dangle, ling, dongle, ding, dee.
Hey.
Okay, but still, wait, one more. Okay, and then there was also, I guess, in Byte magazine, there was an ad by Rainbow Technologies in 1992 that said that dongle was actually derived from its inventor, who was a Mr. Don Gall. But the
I
best,
really wanted his last name
right
to
at
be
the
dongle.
end, the most obvious explanation is this. that dongle is the result of a classic portmanteau. Dave Wilton has a leading theory on dongle, and it is this. The word is most likely a blend of dong and dangle, as it can resemble a penis that hangs off a computer.
It all comes back to the bits.
I know. So this is why I had to go up. So dongle.
The computer bits, right?
Heyo. That's right.
Can I say penis on this podcast?
We'll just mark it explicit.
Okay.
Although it's not really, like, kids should know that word.
That's right. Alan?
Moving away from anatomy.
What?
Or maybe expanding upon my own anatomy, if you really... I mean, not that anatomy.
Are we going to have to edit this part out, Alex?
So go on the blooper reel.
My nerd word is clipless, from clipless pedals being a type of pedal that you get for your bike, which somewhat nonsensically you clip into. So there's those from Wikipedia. Clipless pedals require a special cycling shoe with a cleat fitted to the sole, which locks into a mechanism into the pedal and thus holds the shoe firmly to the pedal. So clipless pedals, which I just got this month.
So the anatomy you refer to as your foot.
So they say that clipless pedals help you go faster, but really I wanted to become one with my machine part.
Connection.
So I was like, clipping into my bike is basically how it is.
So you're going to be a human bicycle cyborg.
I'm going to be some sort of centaur, but instead of the body of a horse, I have the body of a bicycle.
It's got to come up with a name for that.
But I mean, really, that's all I have about clipless. Like, the guy at the store said to practice on a field because you will like fall down constantly because you have to like shift your heel out to be able to get out of the heels. And he's like, everyone falls. And I talked to some of my other biker friends and they're like, yeah, I fell. I would like to say that I've had it for like a month. I have not fallen once.
Yeah, you're going to fall like later today.
Just jinxed it.
Just because
I have no more biking today.
Okay, tomorrow then.
Apparently it's much more obviously much more dangerous to fall off when you're clipped in. When I did have a biking accident a few years ago and I like called the what that medical line is
911.
No. Health links. That's the one. The first thing they asked me was, were you clipped into your bike? Which I was not, so thankfully.
So they didn't hang up on you.
Yeah, good. So clipless.
Good words.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have to sign off for this month. Thank you so much, dear readers, for tuning into this, our 19th episode of the Time to Read podcast. In August, join us as we read The Changeling by Victor Laval. Get out on the conversation by finding us on Facebook or emailing us at wpl-podcast.winnipeg.ca. We'd love it if you hit subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast service. We'd love it even more if you were to give us a 5-star rating. And until next time, make sure you find Time to Read.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Time to Read podcast. We were talking about All Systems Red by Martha Wells. Time to Read is a production of the Winnipeg Public Library. Our panel today included Alan Chorney, Kirsten Werman, Erica Ball, and Dennis Penner. Trevor is away on holiday but will return. Our webmaster is Aaron Seaburn. Our social media guru is Regan Brew. Audio production and music by Dennis Penner. Some of the comments from this episode came from Fatima. You can be a part of our show too. Email us at wpl-podcast@winnipeg.ca with suggestions for books that you'd like us to read and discuss, and comments and questions about the book we're reading for our next show. Visit us on the web at wpl-podcast.winnipeg.ca. Check out our show notes with links to some of the things we talked about today, and take part in a discussion about the books we're reading. You can also join our Facebook group. Next month we're reading The Changeling by Victor Laval. We're looking forward to hearing what you think about it.
So I'm awkward. Hold on. I just got awkward over saying the word awkward. Okay.